Hi, everyone. I'm Kristen Young, the Clinical Director of Herren Project, and I am super excited tonight to have Stacey Forrest and Sean Rose here to give us a webinar on the trauma of racism, a self-care approach. So welcome, you guys. Thank you so much for coming. And I'm going to hand it over to you to introduce yourself and get started.
Thank you. I'm Stacey Forrest. I'm happy to be with you here tonight. I have worked in a variety of human services settings for about almost 20 years now, and have worked with a lot of individuals and agencies on really having a thoughtful approach to diversity, equity, and inclusion. And that's how I came to be connected to Herren Project and Sean and I's work with their sort of goals and strategic planning, which you'll hear more about later.
And I'm Sean Rose. We've been working with Herren Project for a little over a year now on all things related to diversity, equity, and inclusion. We've had it be a part of the strategic plan and some other strategic initiatives, and it's been really incredible work and a journey that we've all embarked upon together. I was really inspired after the murder of George Floyd to amplify my voice and amplify some of my own experiences. Since June of 2020, I think I've done 60 to 70 different trainings and or webinars related to diversity, equity, inclusion, and wellness. And I'm happy to be here with you all tonight. And it's always a pleasure working with the Herren Project and the wonderful team there. And we look forward to sharing with you some insightful information tonight, and we look forward to getting started.
Yes, and if you have a question or comment as we're talking, you are more than welcome to put it into the chat if you would like. We will answer them ongoing if we can, or if it's more of a complex question, we'll hold it until the end. And we will try to reserve about the last 5 minutes for a little bit of question and answer and dialogue. Certainly, Kristen and the team at Herren Project has our contact information, and we are more than happy to continue the conversation later if that would be helpful. So,
and I will just also quickly add that Stacey and I are not experts. We too are learning every day and being intentional about learning every single day. I grew up in an environment where on the south coast of Massachusetts, where growing up as a kid before 7th grade, I was surrounded by Black and brown people everywhere I went, and the communities and neighborhoods that I lived in. And then when I was in 8th grade, due to some crime and tragedy around us, I moved into a town of 18,000 where I was literally one of the only a couple dozen Black and brown people in the town. Moved to Boston soon after graduating high school, and it was the hangover from busing, and experienced that as working for the Boston Public Schools. And then from there, went on to meet my wife, who are raising 4 biracial children. So I don't propose to be an expert in anything, as I referenced. We're learning every day too. But with that being said, you know, I think that I and we have a lot to offer as it relates to diversity, equity, inclusion, and it starts tonight here with this webinar with you all.
Okay, we'll jump right in. Okay, oops, starting at the end here. Okay, so we're going to start with a video here with space to talk more about it, but we intentionally chose this to get you thinking about the topic of diversity, equity, inclusion, and how it might relate to some of what you're going to hear. So instead, I'm going to do this and share it with you here. Oops, I forgot to select sound. Okay. Let us know if there's any problems with the audio, but we've been doing pretty well with this. And you're going to see 2 videos here today. Oh, goodness. I'm sorry. It closed on its own, of course. Do you want to lead into the video for a moment, Sean?
Yeah, this is a video that some of you may have seen before. I think for us, it's really just highlights that after many, many, many years, that there is still an underlying undercurrent racism as it relates to skin color. We've used this a lot because it's really powerful again, they did this experiment, 50 years of space in between.
An office when you're not in an office.
50 years of space in between and still have some of the same outcomes. And so for us, we found that to be very powerful. It certainly speaks to the work that still needs to be done.
Thank you. Sorry about the audio there. Here we go. I will blow it up just a minute.
C360, CNN weeknights 10 Eastern.
There are lots of different colors for skin.
I have questions for you about these pictures of different children.
After I read the question, I want you to
Point to the picture that fits the story.
Are children colorblind in America?
show me the smart child.
Show me the mean child.
Can you show me the dumb child?
Show me the nice child.
Is bias measurable even at an early age?
Why is she the bad child?
Because she's black.
And why is he the ugly child?
Because he looks like he's white.
Why is he the dumb child?
Because she has dark brown skin.
Why is she the bad child?
Because she makes fun of everybody else's skin color.
How much do kids learn from what they see and hear from adults?
Show me the child who has the skin color most adults like.
And show me the child who has a skin color most adults don't like.
These are questions that we, along with CNN's Soledad O'Brien and a team of psychologists hired by CNN, spent months investigating through tests, interviews with children and their parents. But they're questions that have been asked for decades. The first doll study ignited controversy in the 1940s when psychologists Kenneth and Mamie Clark pioneered studies in the effects of segregation in schools by asking African American kids to choose between black and white dolls. The so-called doll test found black kids overwhelmingly preferred white over black. Those results were at the center of the landmark 1954 Supreme Court case Brown versus the Board of Education that desegregated American schools. Now, with the first African-American president and nearly 60 years after segregation was overturned, we wondered, where are we today? How do kids see differences in race? What we discovered might shock you, but first, how we got there.
Skin color, child skin color estimate.
Okay, yeah.
We asked renowned child psychologist and University of Chicago researcher Dr. Margaret Beal Spencer to design a pilot study for CNN and analyze the results.
Our children are always near us, because we're a society. And what we put out there, kids report back. You ask the question, they'll give you the answer.
Spencer's team tested more than 130 kids in 8 schools with very different racial and economic demographics. Half of the schools were in the north, half in the south. Oh, nicely done. While the country is much more diverse today than in the 1940s, the children in this project are from 2 age groups and 2 races, white and black, to better allow comparison to the original doll study. 4- and 5-year-old children were asked a series of questions about these images. 9- and 10-year-old children were asked questions about the same images as well as this color bar chart. The tests led us to 3 major findings. First, white children as a whole responded with a high rate of what researchers call white bias, identifying the color of their own skin with positive attributes and darker skin with negative attributes.
Show me the dumb child.
Dumb child.
Okay, why is she the dumb child?
Because she has black skin.
Show me the mean child. Why is he the mean child?
Because she's brown.
Show me the bad child. Why is he the bad child?
Because he is black.
Okay. Show me the ugly child. Why is he the ugly child?
Because he's black.
Show me the child who has the skin color most adults like. And show me the child who has the skin color most adults don't like. Show me the child who has the skin color most children like. Show me the child who has the skin color most children don't like. Show me the child who has the skin color most girls want. Show me the child who has the skin color most girls don't want.
The questions that got overwhelmingly white-biased answers?
Show me the dumb child.
About 76% of the younger white children pointed to the 2 darkest skin tones.
Show me the mean child.
About 66% of the younger white children pointed to the two darkest skin tones.
Show me the child who has the skin color most children don't like.
Again, about 66% of the younger white children pointed to the two darkest skin tones.
Show me the bad child.
More than 59% of the older white children pointed to the two darkest skin tones. But some white children did have more race-neutral responses.
So could you show me the good-looking child? So what are you thinking? I know you pointed to them all, but tell me what you're thinking.
I'm thinking that I do not care if they are black, white, mixed, or any kind of race. I think that it matters who they really are.
So again, some of you may have seen that before, and every time I've seen it, it kind of touches me as well. I remember, thinking as a kid, that my grandmother and grandfather had 10 daughters. My mom had 9 sisters. And I remember thinking that my sister was darker skin, and all of our aunts are different, shades of, brown. And I felt that there were times that there were people, external to our family who kind of had a different approach to my aunts who were lighter skin, and always wondering if they would be, that nice to my sister who was darker skinned. And I remember that as a young kid, just kind of feeling that intense, like, underlying racism. A lot of people will ask, when's the first time that, you ever had an experience of racism? And I can, was it in a store or people following you or whatever it may be? And my first experience with it was noticing how people connected differently to different shades of skin color in my aunts and in our family. So what is diversity, equity, inclusion? There are some definitions here, and we'll certainly share these slides and things. I just want to focus for a minute on the ally aspect of this. A person of one social identity group who stands up in support of members of another group, typically a member of a dominant group standing beside members of a targeted group. I can say unequivocally that, if it weren't for people outside of the Black and Brown community stepping up on behalf of the Black and Brown community after the murder of George Floyd, perhaps we're not in front of you today. I think that it took a lot of allies stepping up and screaming Black Lives Matter from the rooftops and everywhere, from outside of the Black and Brown community, before people started to get really reflective and making themselves vulnerable and embarking on this type of work. I can tell you unequivocally that I wouldn't have done many of these trainings, or as many as I've done in the past couple years, if it weren't for this. We're going to touch on this a little bit later on, but I just wanted to highlight that as it relates to this slide. So we have some goals, just like any other training. We're going to try to help you to understand diversity, equity, inclusion concepts much better. We want you to understand and identify the impacts of racial trauma on mental and physical health. We want to identify some wellness skills and things that you can do to support your own health. And our project goal, of course, is to actively participate in the Herren Project's DEI trainings and workshops as part of the strategic plan to engage key stakeholders on topics of race. When we live in a environment where current events, are happening all around us, in our phones, on our computers, and it's kind of nonstop. And what I've come to learn about current events and the impact of current events on us is that they kind of float around like, little particles in the sky that just kind of land on you and create this like weight or pressure or underlying stress that is invisible and goes unnoticed. you know, the Asian hate crimes that came online when COVID hit, the LGBT community, you know, constantly, you know, negatively impacted by hate. What we're observing and witnessing in Ukraine, and of course, you know, the murder of George Floyd. This mural in the middle of this slide here, the Black Lives Matter mural, was actually done in Worcester, Massachusetts. It was myself and a good friend of mine brought artists together to hail and to come together in the spirit of Black Lives Matter. And we put this mural out on the street of Major Taylor Boulevard and Martin Luther King Boulevard here in Worcester, Mass. So we're really proud of it. So any chance I can get Stacey to squeeze this slide in there, I'm very thankful. You know, we talk a little bit about, you know, current events and the stress of race and this and all those different things. And it would be remiss if we didn't, you know, highlight some of the negative impacts that COVID has had on us. I really like this slide because it's multi-generational and it really speaks to how COVID has impacted our mental health. 67% of people reporting a higher rate of stress, 57% anxiety, and 53% feeling more emotionally exhausted. In effect, what it's done is COVID has created this weight on us, and this weight on us of just consistent like anxiety and depression and just kind of feeling trapped. And so you have the weight of, you know, things happening in society, of course, but, you know, the COVID weight is one that I don't think any of us could have ever imagined. So it's really important to highlight how COVID is kind of mixed in with the, you know, the day-to-day stressors and societal stressors, to just make it feel like there's such a weight, you know, hanging over you.
And I do see a question in the chat. Historically, humans react and behave in this manner sparked by events. How can we further stop this reaction aside from just awareness? That's a perfect question and pretty good segue into, I think, more of what we're going to talk about. How we can channel, whether it be outrage, despair, frustration, by a current event or ongoing events, to something that both supports our physical and mental health, but also feels like we're giving back and we're doing something. So we will talk about that.
And when we think about, you know, this whole webinar is really focused on, you know, the moral injury and the stress caused by racism. And so for us to look at racism through have you all look through racism through a different lens. And when we think about that, it's social isolation, police interaction, as I referenced, the social unrest around the world, fear for loved ones, social media content that we're going to touch on big time later on, microaggressions and systemic poverty and ethnic wars. We're going to touch on a number of these topics as we move forward.
So here we're going to talk a little bit about how our brains respond to stress. This is important because understanding this can help us move from reaction to understanding and action and proactiveness. So there's different types of stress, right? We have positive stress that essentially is part of our everyday lives that keeps us moving and doing things. The body has a normal response to everyday stressors that is typical for how we all live, learn, and function in society. Everyday stressors could be a little bit of traffic or a big meeting at your job, right? These are normal positive stressors that hopefully spur you to work hard or to take on a new project or to be excited about change. It might feel stressful, but it's manageable. Beyond that, we have tolerable stress. This stress activates the body's stress response system, which is a part of the brain that is really survival. It's things like fight or flight. It is leaving a situation that's overwhelming. It is taking a minute to ourselves because the stress might be too much. However, we can continue to function and do the things we need to do. It might feel uncomfortable, but we can tolerate it. We can access resources. We can ask for help. That's when we're starting to feel the stress and it doesn't feel great. But we can think, okay, I noticed this. What am I going to do about it? Then the most serious form of stress is what we call toxic stress. That comes from prolonged exposure to this emergency response system in the brain. When we live in toxic stress zone, or it's just so frequent that we can't escape it and we barely recover from one stressor before something else happens, then the brain gets used to living in that place. It makes it harder for us to learn, harder to maintain our relationships and friendships, harder to focus at work, harder to think ahead. And this is not just my opinion. There's tons and tons of research on this topic that says that when we identify that we might be experiencing toxic stress, or if we're in a tolerable stress place and we want to prevent ourselves from escalating to toxic stress, now's the time to do something to help regulate the brain so that our body doesn't feel like it's in this overwhelming survival mode because what's going on around us is too much. It's too frequent, it's too intense. And so what we want to talk about is tolerable stress and toxic stress, in both how to identify it and how to treat it, essentially, if you notice it in yourself or in someone you care about. So what is racism here? This was briefly discussed at the beginning, but racism is a system of structuring opportunities and assigning value based on the social interpretation of how someone looks. So this is not an innate problem. This is a socially assigned problem based only on somebody's appearance, like Sean's example of perceived skin color and what that might mean. And it unfairly disadvantages some individuals and unfairly advantages other individuals. And we're going to talk about that in a moment. The belief that a particular race is superior in some way and that a person's social or moral traits are predetermined because of this. This is the link back to that video we talked about in the beginning, right? This is where racism begins. Children are not born with these ideas. These are not innate beliefs. This is a system of understanding race that is pervasive. And I just like that racism equals prejudice and power, which is sort of a good entry into talking about white privilege, which we're going to discuss in a moment. I noticed a comment in the chat. I'm just going to take a piece. Oh, thank you. Yes, I agree. Absolutely. So why is this important? I don't have to go over this a lot with you all because you're here. So I'm guessing that means that you know that it's important. But if this gives you a language, maybe to share with somebody else who doesn't think this is important, then I'm happy to do that. We're talking about racism as a social determinant to healthcare, who we can communicate, what we're eligible for, if people take our symptoms seriously, right? Our mental health for all the same reasons, and has a profound impact on us as young as when we are children. I think we saw an example of that. And we understand that racism creates moral injury, essentially a feeling of perceived trauma or toxic stress, as we discussed a minute ago. And continuing exposure to that problem will continue to cause trauma, which then activates this fight or flight. Like fight or flight could be, I can't even talk about this anymore, it's too overwhelming. Fight could be you're ready to battle with somebody who says something that you don't agree with, right? That activates your fight response and makes you so angry. Freeze could be, I just can't even engage in this because I feel like if I hear or see one more thing, it's going to push me over the edge and I'm going to fall apart. That is the human stress response, and it's there to keep you safe, but we can't live in that place because it's not helpful for us and it doesn't let us address and help be part of the solution. Okay, so Sean is going to share with you a really impactful piece of work. It is from a blog post from a professor named Steve Locke. He has a blog online. If you're interested in reviewing it more, you certainly can. He has lots of other information. This is a story that he's written and approved to be shared, and it is titled, "I Fit the Description," and Sean will be reading it in Steve Locke's words.
This is what I would have worked today. On my way to get a burrito before work, I was detained by the police. I noticed a police car in the public lot behind Center Street. As I was walking away from my car, the cruiser followed me. I walked down Center Street and was about to cross over to the burrito place, and the officer got out of the car. "Hey, my man," he said. He unsnapped the holster of his gun. I quickly took my hands out of my pockets. "Yes," I said. Where are you coming from? Home. Where's home? Dedham. How'd you get here? I drove. He was next to me now. 2 other police cars pulled up. I was standing in front of the bank across the street from the burrito place, and I was going to get lunch before I taught my 1:30 class, and there were cops all around me. I said nothing. I looked at the officer who addressed me. He was white, stocky, bearded. You weren't over there, were you? He pointed down Center Street towards Hyde Square. No, I came from Dedham. What's your address? I told him. We had someone matching your description to try to break into a woman's house. A second police officer sitting next to me, white, tall, bearded. 2 police cruisers passed and would continue to circle the block for over 35 minutes. And I was just standing across the street from the burrito place. You fit that description, the officer said. Black man, knit hat, puffy coat. Do you have any identification? It's in my wallet. May I reach into my wallet? Reach into my pocket and pull out my wallet? Yeah. I handed him my license and I told him I did not have my current address. He walked over to the police car. The other cop, taller, wearing sunglasses, told me again that I fit the description of someone who broke into a woman's house, right down to the knit cap. Well, Barbara Sullivan made this knit cap for me, and she knitted in pinks and browns and blues and oranges and lime green. No one has a hat like this, and it doesn't fit any description that anyone would have. I looked at the second cop. I clasped my hands in front of me to stop them from shaking. For the record, I said to the second cop, I am not a criminal, I'm a college professor, and I was actually wearing my faculty ID around my neck, clearly visible with my photo. Hey, you fit the description, so we just have to check it out, the first cop returned and handed me my license. We have the victim and we need her to take a look at you to see if you are the person. It was in this moment that I knew that I was probably going to die. And I'm not being dramatic when I say this. I was not going to get into a police car. I was not going to present myself to some victim. I was not going to let someone tell the cops that I was not guilty when I already told them that I had nothing to do with any robbery. I was not going to let them take me anywhere because if they did, the chance I was going to be accused of something rose exponentially. I knew this in my heart, and I was not going anywhere with these cops, and I was not going to let some white woman decide whether or not I was a criminal, especially after I told them I was not a criminal. So this meant that I was going to resist arrest, and this meant that I was not going to let the police put their hands on me. If you're wondering why people don't go with the police, I hope this explains it for you. Something weird happens when you're on the street being detained by the police. People look at you like you're a criminal. The police are detaining you, so you clearly must have done something, otherwise they wouldn't have you. No one made eye contact with me. I was hoping that someone I knew would just walk down the street or come out of one of the shops to get off the 39 bus or come out of JP Licks and say to these cops, hey, that's Steve Locke. What are you detaining him for? The cops decided that they would bring the victim to come view me on the street. They asked me to wait and I said nothing, I just stood still. Hey, thanks for cooperating, the second cop said. This is probably nothing, but it's our job and you do fit the description. 5'11", black male, 160 pounds, but you're a little more than that. Knit hat, a little more than 160. Thanks for that, I thought. An older white woman walked behind me and up to the second cop, and she turned and looked at me and then back at him and said, you guys are sure busy today. I noticed a black woman further down the block. She was small and concerned, and she was watching what was going on. I really focused on her red coat. I slowed my breathing. I looked at her from time to time, and I thought, please don't leave, sister. Please, please don't leave. The first cop said, where do you teach? Massachusetts College of Art and Design. I tugged at the lanyard that had my ID. How long you been teaching there? 13 years. And after that, we stood in silence for about 10 more minutes. An unmarked police car pulled up. And this cop went over to talk to the driver, and the driver kept looking at me as the cop spoke to him, and I looked directly at the driver, and then he got out of the car. I'm Detective Cardozo, and I appreciate your cooperation. of course, said nothing. I'm sure these officers told you what was going on. I said, they did. Where are you coming from? From my home in Dedham. How did you get here? I drove. Where's your car? It's in the lot behind Bacara. I pointed up Center Street again. Okay, the detective said, we're going to let you go. Do you have a car key you can show me? Yes, I said. I'm going to reach into my pocket and pull out my car key, okay? I showed him the key to my car. The cops thanked me for my cooperation, and I nodded and I turned to go. Sorry for screwing up your lunch break, the second cop said. I walked back toward my car, away from the burrito place. I saw the woman in red. Thank you, I said to her. Thank you for staying. Are you okay, she said, her small, beautiful face with a line of concern. Not really. I'm really shook up and I have to get to work. I knew something was wrong. I was watching the whole thing, she said, and the way they were treating you, we have to watch that. And I said, I'm so grateful you were there. And I kept thinking to myself, don't leave, sister. May I please give you a hug? Yes, she said, and she held me as I shook, and she said, are you sure you're okay? I said, no, I'm not. And I had a good cry in my car, and then I'm gonna have to go teach. And she said, you're at Mass Art. My friend is at Mass Art. What's your name? She told me, and I realized that we were actually Facebook friends. And I told her this. And she said, I'll check in with you on Facebook. I put my head down and walked to my car. My colleague was in our shared office and she was able to calm me down, and I had about 45 minutes until class began and I had to teach. I totally forgot the lesson that I had planned and I forgot the schedule. I couldn't even think how to do my job. I thought about the fact that my word counted for nothing. They didn't believe me that I wasn't a criminal. They had to find out. My word was not enough for them. My ID wasn't enough for them. My handmade one-of-a-kind knit hat was an object of suspicion. My Ralph Lauren quilted blazer was only a puffy coat. And that white woman could just walk up to a cop and talk about me like I was an object for regard. I wanted to go back and spit in all of their faces. And the cops were deeply satisfied with how they handled the interaction, how they didn't escalate the situation, or how they were respectful and polite. I imagine sitting in the back of a police car while the white woman decides if I'm a criminal or not. And if I look guilty being detained by the cops, imagine how vile I become sitting in a cruiser. I knew I couldn't let that happen to me, and I knew that if it were to happen, I would be dead. Nothing I am, nothing I do, nothing I have means anything because I fit some description. I had to confess to my students that I was a bit out of it, and I asked them to bear with me, and I had to teach. After class, I was supposed to go to the openings for First Friday, but I just chose to go home.
So hopefully, like I said, I hope that brought up a lot for you. And it's a little long, but I think it's so important to hear his entire experience. That could have been any Black or brown person. And that's what resonates with me every single time. And that going to the grocery store is not safe. Driving to work is not safe. Going to your parked car is not safe. And we either as the victim of racism or as an ally, however you self-identify, have to hear from the voices of those who are impacted to be empowered to know what to do, to understand white privilege, and also to know, so what does that mean for how I can help and also how I can take care of myself. I'm a little worried about time. Should I do this one?
Yes.
Okay. All right, let's hope this audio works. This is a short, about a 3-minute video about another prominent community member who found herself to be the victim of discrimination and racism at a grocery store. And I think you'll see how they closely connect.
My sister-in-law, who's half Black, half white, but looks white, blue eyes, whiter than most white folks, very white. She and I, we kind of grew up together. We raised our children together. So they're first cousins, and we, it's a wonderful, very, very multicultural family. So we're going in a Safeway one day. And Kathleen, my sister-in-law, is in front of me. and she's, you know, writing a check for her groceries. Now, my daughter, who at the time was 10 years old, was standing with me, and I was directly behind her, you know, getting ready to get my groceries. So Kathleen comes up, and the checker, who's a strawberry blonde, freckled, very delightful, warm, you know, the checker, this young woman, is talking to Kathleen. Hey, how you doing? Isn't it a nice day today? They're just chatting up, and says, yeah. So Kathy writes her check, and she steps off to the side with her groceries because she's waiting for me. Of course, again, Kathleen looks white, right? So I come up. No conversation. She looks up at me. Absolutely no, just a little chatter. And I write my check. My daughter, however, is 10, notices immediately the difference in how she responds to me. So I write my check, and she goes, I'm going to need 2 pieces of ID. At which point, my daughter looks at me, and she gets very, very embarrassed, and tears are kind of coming up in her eye, like, Mommy, you're not gonna let her do this. Why is she doing this to us, right? So I'm trying to figure out what I should do, because behind me are 2 elderly white women, right? And I'm thinking, okay, so then I become the angry black woman, right? And they're gonna be, and I'm just trying to second guess all the drama. So then I just give her the 2 pieces of ID. I said, you know, some things you gotta choose your battles, right? And then it gets worse. She pulls out the bad check book, right? So this is the book that shows the people who've written bad checks. So she starts searching for my license in the bad checks, at which point it's just out of control now. Just as I'm standing there trying to decide what to do, and it's really deeply humiliating. Now my daughter is in full-blown emotionally upset, who's 10. My sister-in-law walks back over. And she steps in and she says, excuse me, why are you doing this? And the checker goes, well, what do you mean? She goes, why are you taking her through all of these changes? Why are you doing that? She goes, well, this is our policy. She goes, no, it's not your policy because you didn't do that with me. Oh, well, I know you've been. She goes, no, she's been here for years. I've only lived here for 3 months. And so at this point, the 2 white elderly ladies go, oh, I can't believe what this checker has done with this woman. And it's totally unacceptable. At which point the manager walks over. So the manager walks over and says, is there a problem here? And then my sister-in-law again responds. She goes, yes, there is a problem here. Here is what happened. So you see, she used her white privilege. And even though Kathleen is half black and half white, she recognizes what that means. And she made the statement. She pointed out the injustice. And she, as a result of that one act, influenced everyone in that space. But what would have happened? I can't know for certain had the black woman said, this is unfair. Why are you doing this to me? Would it have had the same impact? But Kathleen knew that she walked through the world differently than I did. And she used her white privilege to educate and make right a situation that was.
Sorry, that was the end. To make right the situation that was wrong was the end of that statement. So what we're talking about here is white privilege. And we could go on about this for a whole training in and of itself. And I think it's at least important to recognize before we talk about what it means to be an ally, which is a part of self-care. So often this word gets a lot of pushback. It is hotly debated, but I think that comes from a misunderstanding of what it means and refers to. For many people, white privilege is being able to move through life without being racially profiled, unfairly stereotyped, people finding things you do suspicious, everyday activities, not having to live with that fear, being able to turn on the television, see people of your own race widely represented. These are privileges. You know, I used the example the other day that teaching my daughter to drive, and at no point do I feel like I have to teach her how to respond if she is pulled over so that she is not killed. That is a privilege that I carry that I did not earn, but it is there. That is an example of white privilege.
You know, what white privilege is not is that white folks, this is not the assumption that white folks never struggled or lead effortless lives, or that, you know, they have the privilege of, you know, guaranteed access to healthcare or safety. It does not suggest that, you know, white people have accomplished something and that they didn't have to work for it, and it was unearned. I think that the defensiveness and the pushback is when people think that there's this assumption that, you know, white people never struggled or you know, they can live in safety, or that everything that they accomplish isn't something that they've earned. So we try to highlight, you know, what it is and what it isn't, to really clarify what white privilege truly is.
So what can I do as an ally? I identify myself personally as an ally, and I try to genuinely hold that all the time. And I have a goal for myself as an ally. You're welcome to adopt, which is to learn one new thing or do one new thing every day. Read an article, listen to a first-person speaker, investigate something I don't know before, speak up for somebody, give somebody an opportunity, right? And understand as an ally that feelings of guilt or defensiveness can be common, but they don't help. We can use our privilege to amplify the voices of those around us who do not have a voice or not enough of a voice. If you hear something, you can speak up and do something about that. If you see an opportunity to educate, take it. And that's what Sean and I try to do all the time, is to find a safe and thoughtful way to educate others. And all of these are examples of allyship. The reason we include that, obviously, it's just an important idea to begin with, but also because finding ways to make situations better or to use your privilege is a form of caring for yourself, because it turns the conversation from guilt or shame or feeling like there's nothing I can do. How can I fix this? What can I do about it? To say, actually, I have a huge power here that I can use. And doing that sometimes helps you feel like you can be a part of the solution. Just like this phrase, the most dangerous advantage of privilege is the power of the privilege to deny that it exists.
So when we think about self-care, we think of it and we look at it through the lens of vicarious trauma. And I'm not going to bore you with the clinical details of vicarious trauma, but a quick example is you're a firefighter, you get up, you know, the alarm's going, you figure out the destination, you get all your stuff on, you get into the fire truck gets to the place, you extinguish the fire, everyone's safe, everyone's out, you get back in the fire truck, you get back to the fire station, and that immediate quick response of stress, that anxiety, that fear of the unknown, that's you're carrying in that moment, stays with you, and it has long lasting impacts on your brain and your body. Watching the moral injury of watching George Floyd be murdered right before our eyes created elements of vicarious trauma. A mass shooting in Buffalo, New York, at I believe a grocery store, with almost a dozen people being killed, creates this element of vicarious trauma in us. Seeing some of the videos in New York of Asians being targeted by violence, or those in the LGBT community being targeted by violence, creates an element of vicarious trauma in us. And so when we think about self-care, we look at it through that lens, and in an effort to decrease vicarious trauma or eliminate or eradicate vicarious trauma, we go through different domains, and they're listed here: physical, workplace, psychological, emotional, spiritual, relationships. And so we're gonna go through some of these different domains very quickly to give you some ideas on how to, you know, take better care of yourself when these issues arise, and you're carrying this feeling of guilt or shame or just loneliness around some of the things that you may be seeing and feeling.
So I'm going to do physical quickly. This is really the foundation of self-care, and it's a little cliche, but that's for a reason, because if we don't take care of our physical selves, we can't be there for others. We can't support one another. We can't protest. We can't rally. We can't speak up if we're not well and we're not present. And, you know, taking the lens of racial justice, for example, I would be confident in saying that there are people who feel as though they cannot sleep safely because they don't know if a no-knock warrant is going to be issued on their home. And that makes them feel like they're living in terror every single day. And so I think we can all imagine how all of these can be exacerbated. So we start with this because the absolute foundation is looking at how we eat, sleep, and move. as a real starting point for how we're taking care of ourselves, so that some of the other platforms we can be more effective.
You know, as we jump into the workplace domain, I'm not going to read all of these, but a couple that I really like is there's an anti-racism daily newsletter right now where every day you can get different real positive reinforcement and feedback. It's really great, easy to find right on Google. One of the things I really like this is the Racial Justice Book Club. I've worked with numerous organizations that have done all types of books and bringing people together to just be thought-provoking and really engage in good, rich conversation as it relates to race and obviously this is happening in the workplace. And then the other thing that I really like about here is I've really encouraged a lot of agencies and businesses and all these folks that I work with to promote a Black or brown-owned business. You know, so once a month you really are intentional about saying like, oh, we're going to go to this spot or this place or whatever it may be. So just a couple things, and again, we're going to share these slides with you to be able to choose some of these things on your own. We're not going to go through every single one of them. Just want to highlight a few that we like.
Yes, and I would really encourage you. Our challenge here is pick one or two off each slide and commit right now. Don't leave here today without feeling like you're going to do something. And hopefully you'll see lots of ideas and maybe you want to do lots of things, but at least something. When we talk about psychological, really referring to our general mental health, we can think about our exposure to triggers. I was really moved by something I had read on social media after George Floyd was killed from a Black voice, a woman who said, "We know you're trying to support us by bringing awareness to the murder of George Floyd, by resharing this police video. But what you are doing is re-traumatizing us. You're taking the most triggering thing that someone could see and putting it in our faces over and over and over again. Can you find a different way to help?" And that really stuck with me. Obviously, that was 2 years ago now, and I still think of that. So it is appropriate to minimize exposure to triggers. That does not mean we're avoiding it. We're helping in a different way. Always identify if you need help. It is encouraged to ask for that. Trauma symptoms can be unable to sleep, lack of appetite or overeating, withdrawal from relationships, moods that you feel like you can't control, fear, even when there doesn't seem to be a cause in the moment. I'm not a therapist, so I'm not going to go on the whole long list, but identify when you need support. That is probably one of the most important things. You can find journals and writing prompts online related to racial justice. You could make sure that you celebrate positives in your life, like cultural festivals, going to museums you've never attended before, taking up new podcasts, right? Ways to be addressing your psychological health, but still doing it from a racial justice lens will be achieving both of those goals, caring for yourself and caring for your community.
You know, as we jump into the emotional domain, you know, a couple of things that I really like here, because we're all in the helping profession and we're all super strong and we're all super tough and we're oftentimes the ones that people rely upon in our own families and our friends and our college friends and our own networks, where we're always the rocks for that. But just allowing yourself to cry, finding things intentionally to make yourself laugh, working with individual folks around wellness, you know, going to bed at night with a comedy. You know, there's such a weight that bears on you when these issues of moral injury and vicarious trauma and all the stress and social injustice, that it's just like a weight. And I liken it to just like wearing a backpack full of bricks. And so in an effort to kind of take a brick out here, kind of lighten the load, this is why we're encouraging to really focus on these domains. And, you know, so a good example is like expressing your outrage, not through, you know, social media, whatever it may be, but like actual action, you know, writing, you know, local government, municipal government, you know, donating to things, marching and protesting as safely as you can are also ways to kind of like take some of this weight off of you. And, you know, one of the things that I'll say here too is just stay in contact with the importance of COVID and all these things. It's just staying in contact with the important people in your life, those people that trust you and love you unconditionally. I think that those of us in the helping profession, like, don't like to make ourselves vulnerable, but we need it now, because more than ever, because we're only as good for others as we are to ourselves. And we really need to embark on some of these emotional kind of wellness plannings in an intentional way because of our own work.
From a spiritual lens, I think a lot of these I think are really important. I was having trouble picking just a few to highlight, but essentially making time to reflect. So if at the end of each day, you could ask yourself, what's one thing I did today for self-care? What's one thing that I felt triggered by today, and how will I handle it to recover? Or if that thing comes up again, it could be a very short reflection like that. I am a big fan of mindfulness and ways of using mantras, for example. So, you know, maybe you adopt a mantra that is whatever speaks to you, but maybe we can do better. I am doing everything I can, but I will also do more. And I am inspired to do more. Whatever sticks with you, I think using a moment throughout the day to reflect on that can remind you that you are doing what you safely can. Read inspirational literature, attend talks, things you wouldn't usually go to, and expose yourself to new things that make you think. Even intentionally picking somebody who has the opposite opinion of you than something and hearing it and trying to reflect and questioning why you value something, why you think something, and being willing to be open to that can be one of the biggest things that you can do. And I think you are all willing to do this because you're here questioning, hopefully, many things already.
Yeah, and you know, all of these things on the relationships domain side are really good. I just would encourage you all to really reevaluate your relationships for those who share your beliefs and values, and really just cling on to that and gravitate to that. There's so much negativity and cynicism around us. Just eliminate it out of your life. You know, if that college friend who's been the same way to you for the last however many years, and he or she or they are not going to change, just eliminate them out of your life. We don't need any more bricks than we already have in our backpack, and a good way to alleviate that stress is just by getting rid of the toxic relationships of people in your life. You know, we talked a little bit about, you know, current events floating around and the impact of current events on our brains and our bodies, but social media, in my opinion, is one of the most damaging things to us right now. The Social Dilemma is an excellent documentary that I strongly recommend everybody read. It speaks to all the algorithms and all the science around and the engineering around people trying to sell us things and advertise or get us to think a certain way. And, you know, one of the things that is coming out of research is that social media is becoming more addictive than cigarettes and alcohol. Instagram, Facebook report a 40% increase in usage since the start of the pandemic. So as people were home and news sources have kind of declined over the years, newspapers and such, people are really hyper-focusing on social media to be their true and genuine, like, news source that has all this integrity, and it's playing a role in our lives from a stress standpoint. I always call Facebook fake book. It's just a presentation of what people want you to see. And, like, you know, like my neighbors down the street, always fighting, and, you know, they I know they hate each other and I can hear them. Yet if you went on Facebook, you'd see that they're like the most lovey-dovey, loving relationship. Like, you know, you look at that and you're like, oh man, like, I wish my relationship could be like that, because it's only a fake presentation of what people want you to see. So here are some tips to reduce social media. One of the things that I like about this side is that don't tell your kids to do something that you're not doing, right? Like, you can't tell them, like, oh, get off your phone, you're on your phone all day, or, you know, we'll put it up for 30 minutes, or use some of these suggestions, ideas, and not do it. It's just not fair to you or them, and it's just kind of contradictory to what we're trying to do in alleviating and eliminating stress.
So we'll leave you with two ideas. One here: not everything that is faced can be changed, but nothing can be changed until it is faced. And I hope that you're all here because you agree, and that you are not just willing, but eager to step up and face what needs to be changed. And my last favorite idea that somebody once told me that I like to pass on is, we cannot control our first thought. We can't control what pops into our head sometimes, whether it is an unconscious bias or a white privilege statement. It pops into our head based on our lifetime of learning. So while we can't control our first thought, we can control our second thought and our first action. We can challenge that thought intentionally, and then we can choose what we're going to do about it. And I just have always found that to be very powerful. So I'm going to take down the slides. As promised, we have the last 5 minutes here for discussion, questions. You're free to disagree with us at will too.
Please,
So I have been following. Some folks have put a lot of great thoughts in the chat. Many were not questions, they were just sort of thoughts. We'd love to read them, and we've been looking at them as we go. So thank you for that. If you do have a question that you'd like to address, you can put it into the chat, or you can do the raise hand feature. Okay, that's fine. Oops, I saw one pop in the last second. Question for Sean. How many days did the mural take?
It actually took us 9.5 hours to get done. And we were on the clock because the negative energy from people around the city overwhelmed a number of people. And we were fearful that someone was going to try to get us moved or run over it or whatever it may be. So we hustled. I think we had about 200 people there. Every letter, with the exception of 2, was a local artist and a Black and brown person, and we had other mixes in there. It was just an incredible and very powerful day getting that done, and it certainly was something that helped hail our city.
Any other last comments or questions? Okay, well, we thank you all for being here with us. We will definitely share the slides with Kristen, and she can decide the best way to distribute those with you. And we are always happy to answer questions after the fact or share any of our materials, but thank you for your time.